And today we've gathered some of the forefathers of social VR together. And so I'm going to bring them out one by one onto stage. I'd like to start with Philip Rosedale. Philip is well known for being the founder and creator of Second Life originally, and he is now working on a project called High Fidelity, which is a social network that he will be telling you a lot more about in just a moment. Next, we'd like to welcome out Erik Romo, CEO of AltspaceVR. Followed by him, we're going to have Peter Gray from Linden Labs. And this wouldn't be a virtual panel if we didn't have someone arriving via telepresence. Coming in on a beam robot from the back, very slowly, we have Shawn Whiting from Convrge. Shawn? All right, gents. So I'm going to start us off here. I'm going to pass the mic down. I'd love you each to describe a little bit about what your platform is doing and answer one not so simple question. What is social VR?
All right. So I work at Linden Lab, which is the company that Philip founded, best known for Second Life, which is a virtual world created entirely by its users. So Second Life is about to turn 12 years old, still going strong, and filled with a huge variety of virtual experiences created by people around the world. We've also begun work on a brand new platform for user-created virtual experiences called Project Sansar, which in the similar spirit to Second Life will enable people to create their own virtual experiences that are social, interactive, and also of a very high quality, easy to share with people around the world. So what is social VR is kind of a tough question. I think the main way I describe it is it's any experience where you're able to create a virtual space and communicate with other people within that space. So it's a sort of form of contextual communication.
Sure. Awesome. So I'm Philip Rosedale. Right, I've been passionate about all this stuff my whole life. Second Life was the product and the company that I started. And now, High Fidelity, we're trying to work on the same stuff, which is getting a lot of people into a shared space and allowing them to build and interact and be together. What's different about High Fidelity, and in contrast, and additive and different from what Linden we are doing with Second Life, is that High Fidelity is trying to do a couple of things that are a little farther out, I'd say. One is to use everyone's machines as the servers for the virtual spaces they're creating, so that's one thing that's a bit different. And then I would say very much alongside AltspaceVR, we're trying to solve all these problems around the one-on-one experience and kind of what we need to do to wire in enough information about what you're doing when you're communicating to make it compelling. And I think that definition of social VR, my own definition of virtual reality itself is when we experience things in a way that is sufficiently similar to our memories of what we expect them to be, that we take them as real. The revolution of the head-mounted display is that it simply presents us with this 3D stuff in a way that moves when we move our heads and kind of fills our whole vision. And that's just good enough for us to believe in it as being real in the same way that our memory of our bedroom or the last place we were is, and that's what makes that magical. So social VR, therefore, is the challenge of getting to a sufficiently good experience when you're communicating with somebody, with a person or maybe with a group like this, that you would step back and say, it's good enough. It's as real, and there you are. And so I think the challenge of doing that in, say, constructed 3D spaces is one particular challenge. How do you make those spaces look good enough to be real? And then the challenge of doing it in one-on-one communication is like this other set of problems, and basically that's what we're trying to do with High Fidelity.
Great, thanks. So I'm Erik Romo, I'm the founder and CEO of AltspaceVR. We really see ourselves as a communications company at the end of the day. So what we need to get right to do this well is to allow people to communicate in real time. And what's different about that than other communications mediums, than the telephone or text chat or video chat, is nonverbal communication, is this ability to know by my body language and by what I'm representing with my body what I'm trying to communicate to you. There's experiences that you can have in Altspace and in other platforms where you feel as if you're there with that other person, and that's kind of the fundamental experience that we're trying to drive at Altspace. But we really feel strongly that once you're there, you need to have some context for that communication, some reason to be there, and so to kind of build on top of that, what we've done is we've really at a low level integrated web browsing functionality into Altspace, and so having this ability to share 2D web context and have the ability to view the same thing at the same time from the web is really important because it gives all of these potential use cases. So anything from throwing up a slide presentation and us having this experience that we're having here in Altspace to this being Netflix, and now we're all going to watch a movie together. And then the last thing is we've to give context to communication, we've created this SDK where you can create experiences in traditional web code, JavaScript, HTML, CSS, that actually run in a browser context, but create and render themselves in 3D in that shared space. And so that makes it really easy for developers and for us to create these synchronized virtual applications that run inside of Altspace. So briefly on what is social VR, I think the core of social VR really is that communication around a shared experience. So that emotional feeling like we're actually in the same place, that subconscious effect that we are here together. And you know what's really interesting about social VR is I'd say it approaches and approximates real life more than other communications mediums, in that there's a reason that you guys are all in this same room together to receive this information, and I think that's because you feel like you're experiencing the same thing at the same time. You have this emotional uplift of being around other people, and that's something you can have in this shared virtual experience that you can't necessarily have on a video chat or on the phone.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, good, cool. Yeah.
Sweet. So hello everybody, I'm Shawn Whiting. I'm one of the co-founders at Convrge. And what Convrge is we're a shared social space in VR, virtual world, and we allow people to come in and hang out with their friends. We throw a lot of virtual events where people come in and talk. We have a virtual theater. We have games that people come in and play with each other. And I would agree with what everyone said. I think my definition of social VR is, instead of giving people presence in a world, the goal of social in particular is to give people a sense of presence with each other, and that's a very different set of challenges than your standard VR application. So I think that sense of shared presence is really what I'd say social VR is.
So that's a great place to jump off from. So speaking of presence, they say that the eyes are the window to the soul, and I think some of the biggest news that's come out of here for social VR and this conference has been AltspaceVR's integration of eye tracking. So to the whole panel here, how crucial do you feel that eye tracking is to creating presence within a social VR setting?
Should we start that end? Or? Sure.
So John, you want to start?
Oh, sure. So eye tracking, we found that in Convrge, a sense of eye contact, at least, is incredibly important. We noticed that the avatars that have really well done eyes, or that even have eyes, get a lot more emotional response from people in the world. So we have some avatars that are, maybe it's like a Darth Vader mask, or maybe it's like a Power Rangers helmet, where there's no definite place to get a sense of where the person's eyes are. But when you have an avatar like a Pikachu with like big anime eyes, it like really creates a much greater sense of talking with someone and really feeling what they're saying. So I imagine like with the Altspace eye tracking that I saw the other day that they'd integrated, that sense of like seeing someone blink and seeing their eyes kind of move around will really help a lot.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly additive. It's so much so that I would be surprised if it weren't in the Gen 2 and Gen 3 headsets from all the companies. I think that it's with anything that you add, any sensor that you add, anything that tracks your body language, we find that ups the experience. So you add a Leap Motion and you get hands, and that's even better. You add a Connect and you get the whole body, and that's even better. So the more you can measure about a person, we find the better that the experience is. The more, not only do I feel like I'm there, but more importantly, do other people feel like they're there with me. In particular on eye tracking, I mean, there's I think Bruce has done a great job of showing this off. We've got there's so many emotions you can just convey with your eyes, right? That you you don't get with any other part of your body, and so it's a really important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to make it interesting in terms of stuff from our research that's a bit different or additive. Here's a fascinating thing. We have meetings where we'll have people in mixed modes. Some people will be tracked by a 2D or a 3D depth camera. 3D depth camera is a little better. It can get, motions in my mouth and my eyes, the skin around my eyes that are pretty detailed. And we have people in head-mounted displays where the only thing you get from them is essentially the rotation and position of their head, because we can't. There's some demos of this, but nobody yet has a full face tracker working in conjunction with an HMD. Here's something fascinating. The people listening to you would rather you be in the HMD. Intriguing. And the reason for this related eye contact is two things. There's a psychological arousal that occurs when I look right at you. It's very notable. You can feel it. I can do it with people in the audience right now, and you know who you are. Pointing my nose directly at you is actually the most important first order part of that indication of interest. I'm looking at you and I'm doing it. The second thing is definitely got to be the higher frequency movement of your eyes that you do while you're looking at somebody. And then, like Erik said, there's all the meta phenomena, which are statements of communication that you make, like evocatively, or like you guys were talking in the video about, like, am I lying because I'm looking up there? But the high frequency motion with low latency with which you look at somebody's lips or eyes as you're talking to them is incredibly arousing. I'm using that word in the neurophysiological way. It's very important for us when we're talking to people. So the first order thing is pointing your nose, which is what the HMD enables, which is why the HMD is so interesting compared to like video conferencing or doing 3D with just a flat panel in front of you. And then the second thing I think will be the eye tracking, and that's gonna. I agree with Erik. I think the second gen. I think it's straightforward enough that the second gen headsets should be able to have eye tracking built in, and I agree it's going to make a huge difference in the sense of somebody really being there.
So I think it's eye tracking is definitely hugely important for. Particularly for some use cases, like if the virtual experience that I want to have is replicating a one-to-one conversation in the real world, or sort of a replacement for a FaceTime call, or that kind of thing, and certainly has huge importance for the sort of non-verbal communication that Erik mentioned earlier. But I think there are also some virtual experiences where it's less important. So if the experience that say Philip and I are having is exploring a base on the moon, and our avatars are both wearing space helmets, I don't necessarily need to see where he's looking, just as I wouldn't were we actually there. So I think it's hugely powerful and certainly very important, but also not necessarily a given for that sort of sense of presence in every use case, in every sort of experience.
So that sense of presence is something that is incredibly important, I think, to any social experience, any real experience in VR. And there's a lot of factors that really go into creating that sense of presence. But looking specifically in a social setting, what are the most key factors in creating that one-to-one presence?
So I think eye tracking is huge. Low latency to of both audio and visual. Spatial audio, I think, is huge. Being able to hear somebody coming from where they should be coming from in the virtual space. There are likely many others, but I'll leave it at that and pass it on.
Yeah, in terms of context, as opposed to just information flowing between me and you, one of the things we've discovered that's fascinating, we do a lot of 3D audio processing in high fidelity. We sort of mix everybody together, and we, to make a long story short, we do the 3D correctly. So you can have a bunch of people in a room, and it really sounds like they're exactly where they are in front of you. But one of the things we discovered is that actually the sound of people's voices reflecting off the walls of a room is actually a critical component to your feeling like you're in a space with them. So that's a weird little piece of context that needs to be added. It's actually kind of a pain to do that technologically correctly. So we're working on it, but that's one of the things that's interesting. Communicating, so beyond the face, so there's basically facial expression, there's eye movement and head movement, there's facial expressions that you can see me doing easily at that range. But then there's the movement of the body, particularly obviously the hands, but also the whole body, the shoulders. We were talking about this earlier. The shoulders are a way that we convey information. So low latency, high frequency information about body motion is the other thing that is definitely critical in communication. And every new thing we turn on that we get moving is just an immense improvement in the sense of presence. So we clearly don't know everything that we're seeing when we look at people moving. The other one, as Peter mentioned, is end-to-end latency. This is a more complex concept, but I talk about it all the time with our work. You definitely have to be closer than about 100 milliseconds by the network from the person, because if you're not, you are stepping on each other. You get into that weird other thing where even if you can see me moving perfectly, if we're not able to kind of dance with each other in the rhythm of our bodies, which requires this low latency, we also don't feel connected. So it's both a problem of resolution and information and then time.
Yeah, I don't have a ton to add, but what I would add is that we've seen in latency, because I think our kind of network architecture is a little different, but and so we have higher latency. So is that the key thing for us? It seems to be, are the communications channels synchronized? So are you seeing my body language at the same time that you're receiving the sound? Because what goes really horribly awry in video chat is where you see my mouth making some sound, but you hear me making a different one, and that totally ruins the experience. So what we try to do to make up for that is we try to make sure that my body is emoting exactly at the same time that I said. It's doing the same emotional thing that I was doing when I said the thing I said, if that makes sense. So synchronizing the communication context is really important for us.
So I just kind of made a quick list here of the things that we've found lead to that social presence, and I think the first thing is the voice chat. So we notice immediately when somebody comes in and doesn't have voice chat, it's a lot harder to feel present with them when you're not hearing their live voice. So I think voice chat in social VR is a critical component. The second one is 75 frames per second in the Rift. If you're not getting a buttery smooth experience, people tend to leave after about 10 minutes because they're starting to feel sick. So you have to have very nice frames per second. Latency is big. If you're lagging out the whole time, it doesn't lead to a nice social interaction. And then there's even a word that people have. They call people that come in without the Rift screeners, because they're just pulling it up on their screen. And it's kind of like calling someone a muggle in the Harry Potter universe. It's like kind of seen as a second-class citizen because there's no head tracking on the people that are just on the screen. So you don't actually get a sense of like when they're turning their heads to look at you, or if they're doing it via their mouse. So they're kind of like puppeteering an avatar instead of actually inhabiting the avatar. And it creates a less sense of social presence for everyone around them to some extent.
I think just to tag onto that for 1 second, I think you highlight an interesting challenge with some of early adopter users is that, so you named voice chat, and then we see this with movement mechanisms, and then there are certain things that if you come out of the gaming community, you might expect. Like, so you might expect push to talk, you might expect text-based chat as a primary form of communication that are not necessarily what you would design if you're trying to design a natural communications experience. And so you have this tension between, hey, this is what I get when I play Call of Duty, versus, hey, this is how we talk when we're in a real place together. And it's hard for us because we try to err on the side of this is how your natural communication would be, and we sometimes get pushback from users that say, no, I want to push to talk, and I want to text chat to people and have my what I'm saying above my head rather than just hearing somebody talk.
But worse yet, the keyboard can't be used yet. We don't have good viable strategies for typing something quickly if you're in an HMD. So you have this bizarre who's got what affordance type problem. Yeah, totally.
So this one goes to both of you, Second Life people here. So when Second Life initially came out, there was a very fast growth rate, and you guys accelerated up to 1 million users, but then at that point, your user base topped out. So what lessons can we take away from the first iteration of sort of these social universes that we can use to help bring this to the mainstream at the same level as social media is today?
I think
You want to start?
I think you should start. You founded it. Why don't you take it first?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we would both have, like, probably Peter and I would give you, like, a different sort of strategic versus tactical look at this problem. But obviously, like, it's been a huge part of my life, and I dare say my ego, to worry about, why is Second Life? Second Life is 1 million people. The amazing thing is it's 1 million people. It was 1 million people in about 2007. It's 1 million people now. So as Peter said, it's very much going strong. And actually, it's different people, which is intriguing as well. But it's this one size of community. The biggest, I think there's lots of problems. There are definitely many reasons for that. But the big one that has motivated my work at High Fidelity is that using a mouse and a keyboard to adroitly maneuver, move around in, manipulate things in, and communicate with people simultaneously in a 3D space is an extremely challenging problem. Doesn't mean that it's impossible or not rewarding once you do it, but it means that you have to invest. To learn to use a two-dimensional mouse and a keyboard where you're making chords with your fingers, to do that, to simultaneously, like, fly over to somewhere, click on a doorbell, or talk to somebody, look at them while they're talking to you, there's a learning curve associated with that, which is typically, tens of hours of practice to basically get conversant with it. And doing great work on the UI so that you put a little button that would make it easier to do something, that actually doesn't help because there's still only 2 degrees of freedom in your hand. As soon as you're wearing an HMD, you have, if the space is tracked, you have 6 degrees of freedom moving around. As soon as you can track your hand with a Kinect, a Leap, a Vive controller, whatever, you've got 6 degrees of freedom now in the hand, so that's 12. So what I would say is the dimensionality of the problem, the number of continuous degrees of freedom you need to move around in a virtual world, was, in my mind, the number one thing that kept Second Life from growing larger. It was simply the fact that we couldn't get away from the mouse and the keyboard. And obviously, as we're surrounded by with technology here at this conference, we can today. So it's interesting to see how do we deploy and apply these different pieces, these different pieces of hardware to help us. That's my big thing.
So I think one of the things that the past 12 years of Second Life has shown is the value and interest in user-created virtual experiences. I mean, we've seen, as Philip knows, better than I even, just the huge range of things that people are creating and doing in Second Life every day is incredible. From music, there's a musician here today actually, to education, art, entrepreneurship, fashion, health. There's just no end, and really, it is anything you can imagine is in Second Life. So on the positive side, I think that's one of the huge lessons is that yes, this is there's huge interest in this and also tremendous value in it. I think from coming at it from the other side, though, if your question about why, as you mentioned, we hit a peak of monthly actives around 1 million, and are still there about today. But so why the plateau? I mentioned that Linden Lab is now working on a new platform, and one of the things that obviously we've done as we embark upon this project is think about this question very seriously and go, all right, what are the elements that have sort of restricted or limited Second Life success? Because it has clearly been a success, but not maybe not on the scale that we all would like. So we've identified a number of things. What Philip spoke to is absolutely one of them, but I would say it's more under a general category of ease of use. The challenge of making user-created virtual experiences really easy to use, whether that's from navigation or making creation easy. Just making everything much easier is I think a key thing. But there are a number of other areas as well. Discoverability is a challenge. Second Life is very much sort of shaped as a product rather than a platform. So while there's that huge range of exciting content to go and explore in all of these experiences, to get to them today, you have to go through a singular front door, learn how to use it, then go find your what interests you. And so one of the things we're doing differently in the new platform is treating it as a platform and enabling people to discover experiences more easily, go directly to them. Accessibility is another. Again, Second Life, you go through that front door today, and that's quite limiting. But the other thing is that Second Life is primarily and really only a PC experience. There isn't a real mobile option. As soon as you walk away from your PC, you're disconnected from this experience. And so that's also quite limiting for somebody who's created an experience. They can't reach as large an audience as they could if that could then be accessible, not only by PC, but also would be a great experience with an HMD, a good experience on mobile. So that's something we're doing differently. Scale is another. In Second Life, as you mentioned, monthly actives were around 1 million. But in an individual experience, or a region, as we call them, you're limited by the number of avatars that you can have there. It varies depending on the sort of tricks that you do. But really, a very large event in Second Life will put a number of regions together and hold the event on the corner so you can get 50 on each. But you max out at around 200 people. And so if you wanted to do an experience that's a large conference event or a large classroom, that's very challenging. So that's also something that can be done differently with techniques like instancing and some advances in technology. And then I'd also say just quality. Second Life is far better looking and performing today than it ever has been. A lot of people, when we give them a demo of the Oculus Rift DK2 with Second Life today, are really surprised at what it looks like because their memories of Second Life are all sort of 2007. And we've come a huge way from there, and it really looks impressive. But it still is a 12-year-old platform, and it still is not at the level of quality that we can get by building something from the ground up today. And then lastly, monetization is another sort of limiting factor in Second Life. The way we have it set up, for somebody to create an experience is actually a relatively high investment. And so you need to lay out a relatively high investment to get started, and the potential audience that you can reach with the experience you create is limited. And so all of that is sort of constraining the success, and all of things that we're thinking about very differently with our new platform. But again, not to harp too much on the sort of what went wrong, because I think the bigger lesson from Second Life that we have is that after 12 years, it's going strong. People really want these social virtual experiences. They want to be able to create them themselves. And there's an enormous range of applicability and use cases.
So I promised you gentlemen that this conversation would dip into the philosophical. And so as we sort of are coming to the close here, I'd like to sort of direct it that way. So since the advent of social media, our conversations have more and more frequently happened in an online sphere. But not everyone agrees that this is a good thing. Words like fractured and impersonal have been thrown around, and I'm sure that anyone in here that has a teenager can identify that not all these changes have been for the best. So, do you believe that social VR will have the power to fix some of the damages wrought by social media on our culture?
Yeah, I'll go on that. We were talking about this in Convrge the other day. We had like a little panel basically on the idea of the metaverse and the challenges it would pose. And one of them was identity and privacy. And people were actually saying they felt a greater sense of being with people in VR because you're hearing their voice, you're seeing their movements. And it actually leads to better behavior because people don't want to be trolls. They don't want to be mean to people when you're actually hearing their voice and you get a much greater sense of who that person is. They're not just a screen name on a forum post. So when you imbue people with that actual sense of being a real person, which is what social VR should do, I think you get less bad behavior and you will potentially get something that's less dehumanizing than social media can be sometimes. But sorry, I had a second point to make and I forgot. So yeah, somebody else go.
So I think what we're all trying to create is this emotional feeling of connectedness, this feeling that we're actually in the same place together. And I think I would argue that the word social that we use for there is a little bit of a misnomer in the current context, right? Because social, when you think of social now, is social media, and that is inherently kind of not synchronous and apart. And the way that I think we know that what we're doing is different, and why it's different is if you ask somebody in AltSpace, you ask them the question, where are you right now? The answer that you inevitably get is that they look around and they say, okay, well, I'm in some kind of big theater, and I think I just saw the moon go by, and I'm with Philip. And if you ask somebody on a video chat, where are you? You'll say, I'm in your bedroom or wherever that is, or you're in your home office. Or if you ask somebody on a phone call, where are you? Oh, I'm in Atlanta. But if you ask somebody in a virtual space, if you do it right, they'll say that they're there with those other people. And that feeling, that emotional feeling, the first response is, I'm in that other place. And I think that's fundamentally just very, very different than tweeting at people or text messaging or something like that. And so I actually think, I'd like to think, and we all drink the Kool-Aid clearly, but I'd like to think that what we're doing is allowing people to connect again and making it easier for them to do so.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't say it more. We saw this with Second Life, and it was one of the inspiring things about Second Life that continues to make me want to work on this stuff kind of beyond the science fiction Lego world, vision of the Matrix, but the effect on people is a very profound one. In particular, in Second Life, just to give you a specific example of this, people would get in the forums, which were text-only, internet-like, forums, and then they would also be in-world in Second Life. And I cannot tell you, as the leader of the band, how many times I saw the same situation occur, which is two individuals, or me and somebody else even, would be tearing each other apart in these forums in a very ugly way, very, social media, all the ills of social media kind of way, bullying each other, making each other suffer. And then you get these two people together in-world, in Second Life, and even without voice chat, even with just as Erik said, even with the sensation being that they were in the same shared space, using only text to communicate, in every case, they'd immediately be like, "Oh, I don't know what I was thinking." And so it is definitely the case that by creating the sensation of presence, of context initially, and just allowing people to communicate at all, even via just text, you improve the human condition. But there's also no question that as you increase the bandwidth between the people, they begin to communicate nuance and resolve disputes that are more sophisticated in their nature, or establish levels of trust that they didn't have before. We will definitely see that with these technologies, and it will definitely be of sufficient benefit that people will be willing to pay for all our products here, and people will be able to gain a significant benefit in terms of being closer to each other from using them. So I am definitely a huge believer in that idea, and I think that, text is a very spare and sometimes asynchronous text is a very terse and tough medium, and what we're all moving toward here is better and better, and we've seen it with Second Life already, and now we're just going to go farther. So, yeah, totally.
I think what Philip said is absolutely true, and certainly something we see a lot of. I think the context of communicating in a virtual space adds a degree of humanity that I think is great. And it's not to say that there's no bad behavior. There's certainly trolls online in any capacity. The two things I would add to what's already been said are, one, I think that social VR has incredible potential as it relates to identity and a person both feeling free to express themselves and explore who they are. There was actually a few weeks ago, maybe months at this point, there was a great article in Vice about a transgendered woman who, through exploring her identity in Second Life, was able to, offline in her real life, become who she felt she was. And so stories like that, I think, are incredibly powerful, where virtual reality gives people, and virtual experiences gives people a sort of opportunity to either connect with other people that they might not otherwise, experience things they might not otherwise be comfortable with or able to. And I think that in itself has huge power for good, over and above what sort of other more limited forms of social media may have. Then the last point I would make is I think one of the things that really excites me about virtual experiences overall is that as a communications medium, it is clearly another step. You know, previously I could tell you about something. I've experienced, and today it's very easy for me to share a photo or a video of something, and you get a much better sense of it from there. But with a virtual experience, I can actually put you there. I can actually have you be there and experience that for yourself. And so I look at the work of people like Nane de la Peña, the immersive journalist, and I think that has enormous power and enormous potential for good in terms of sort of generating empathy in people and bringing them together in ways that you certainly see in other forms of social media today, but I think that it's at a much more sort of visceral and emotional level.
So that experience is so visceral and it is so powerful, and it's something that I think that will draw you to want to stay in for a while. But you look at social media right now, and the average American spends more than 3 hours a day on social media, with younger generations averaging closer to 4. Now, we've seen throughout science fiction, like in books like Ready Player One, this dystopic future where the majority of one's time is spent not in reality, but in virtual reality. So do you guys see social VR as becoming an extension of socialization in the real world, or do you see it eventually becoming the dominant form of social interaction?
I'd say it's more likely to be an extension. I think what we'll likely see is, I was just speaking about sort of the grandiose side of social VR that really sort of takes full advantage of the medium. I think as it becomes more and more popular, you'll likely see people using not that full spectrum, just sort of one flavor of it. And we see that in Second Life today, where lots of people, it's not, for them, it may not be about creating a full experience and enjoying it together. The experience that they're there for may just be connecting with friends, having a quick chat. And I think we'll likely see that. But I think for most people, I expect it will likely be a new way to communicate that augments the rest of their life rather than replaces it. I think for some people who may not have, who may be limited in other ways, though it may become a more and more significant part of their lives. We do see some of that in Second Life today as well. The ability to connect with other people in a virtual space and travel the world and experience things that you may not be able to in real life is certainly very powerful, and I'm sure will continue to be attractive.
That's really hard.
Obviously, I think about this stuff a lot. I'll give you a simple answer, though, and perhaps a contentious one. In the long range of time, the answer is yes. The virtual world will be a more important space for our interactions than here. Why do I say that? First of all, to go to the sort of WALL-E future of, we're all going to become, blobs that, no longer use our bodies. That isn't true. We're already using the head-mounted display and things like the Kinect to cause us to use our bodies. Because we tend to use as many signal inputs as we can, and technology is going to allow it, we're going to ultimately move our bodies. So we're actually not going to turn into the video blobs of WALL-E, because we actually want to and benefit from moving our whole bodies, both in communication and interaction. Our brain is built around a complex sensorium, so one way or another we're going to engage ourselves. But what I would say is, even right now, the very fact that we are lifting our hands up off the desk when we're using and moving our upper bodies, our upper torso, when we're using a head-mounted display is indicative of what the trend is, which is toward full engagement of the body in the environment. Now, as to the environment itself, the virtual environment, as it already demonstrates with Second Life, contains many more people that are culturally farther away from you than the people sitting next to you. This is true today in Second Life. It's one of the most staggering, amazing things about it. Business relationships, for example, in Second Life are more nuanced, more challenging, and more sophisticated than in the real world, because it's actually like we dream about and talk about all the time, but it isn't true in the real world. It's actually likely in Second Life that the guy that's your business partner, the girl, is in Europe, they're in Asia, they're far away from you. So you culturally have to cross greater boundaries when you're operating in these worlds. In the long progress of time, we are going to use millions and millions of machines to create these virtual worlds. And I've talked about this lots, making very simple predictions about what that means, suggests that the spaces that we're going to be crawling around in with all these people that are culturally distant from us are going to be much larger very quickly than the surface of the Earth. And that is a certainty. There isn't a debate to be had about that. There is no mystery as to whether that will happen. It absolutely will. And so what this means is that in all likelihood, not giving someone access to a virtual environment in the more distant future would itself be some sort of a crime. Making us not leave San Francisco will be regarded in the future as vaguely criminal. You wouldn't do it to your children, and you would only do it to a person, I guess, if they were, in jail or something. So we will want to be in these virtual spaces because they will be our primary source of interaction with others, intellectual experience, creative endeavors, etc. That's what I think.
So, I think I'm a little bit torn on this, to be honest. It's hard to picture this place where we're all spending the majority of our time there. But then on the other side of the coin, I look at so many disparate use cases that are going to be more compelling in virtual space, in shared virtual spaces. Anything from, we're talking about how I got started in this. The first thing I was doing was flying around on too many airplanes. And the ability to go and have a meeting with somebody who's in China and not have to fly for 12 hours in each direction is extraordinarily compelling to a lot of people out there. And that's totally different than any of the use cases that we've talked about here so far. And education and conferences and having this experience that we're all having here, but none of you had to go pay for parking or drive down here in the rain, which I know is hard for Californians. These use cases are totally different and appeal to totally different segments of the population. So if you think of it from that perspective, well then, yeah, you see all those different things connecting and filling in, and all of a sudden we're spending lots of time in virtual space. So I think what we like to think about is what's the first step forward, right? What's the first step we're going to take? What are the use cases that the first people that do this are going to enjoy? And so that's what we try and stay focused on. But yeah, man, it's exciting.
Yeah, I agree. It's a question of time scale. So if you're talking long term, I agree with Philip. I think a lot of like a majority of our social interactions probably will take place in virtual spaces. And there's that quote, software is eating the world. And Hayden and I at Convrge like to say VR is eating real world spaces. And I think in the long term, you will see virtual spaces being equally or more important to people as the real world spaces that they spend time in. But I do see it more as an addition to the real world and not a replacement. I mean, I think it's going to be a while before I can get the sensation that I get from like going on a hike with my friends and really enjoying that experience and getting that in VR. I think there's some things that VR will probably never replace. But I think the opportunity to share spaces with people, like we were saying, that are just wildly outside of your context. A lot of the users we have in Convrge are people I would have never ever met before. They're in Germany, they're in Finland, they're in Australia, and yet we're all watching the same movie together in the theater, and we're sharing all the different kind of interpretations we have of it, and I'm learning about other cultures, and that opportunity and the opportunity to meet the people that I've met in VR and to go to these TED Talk style events in Convrge where we're hearing people from Unity come and talk, and we're getting to ask them questions and interact with them in a way that we would have only been able to do if we had traveled, paid for a plane ticket, gone to a conference. I think all those opportunities are just going to be a huge benefit and not in the near term be something that really replaces reality, but just offers all these benefits that were, financially impossible or due to distance were impossible.
Gents, unfortunately, we're sort of getting the time bump here, so we're going to have to cut this short, but this has been an incredibly engaging conversation, and I'd like to really quickly open up to one question from the audience. We had somebody right here in the front jump up very quickly, so.
Okay. First off, I just want to say I love everything that you guys said, but I would come to awe no matter what I was doing with cars because I love the togetherness and we can get all the cool T-shirts. And I just love the oneness here and we can play with all the toys. So I would still come to awe no matter what.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I want to, besides thanking you for your contributions, I want to understand how do you make sense of people who don't get virtual worlds? So, like, I had experiences from, I took virtual worlds like into my job and did machinima at work and had a great experience all the way through, and then I'd share it with people and I could be laughed at on one end, and some people just don't get it and actually actively reject it. So how do you guys process that? What's up with those people?
What is up with those people? So I would say a couple things. One is I think it's far easier to talk to those people about the value of virtual experiences today than it was 6 years ago or certainly longer ago. I think a lot of the things that Second Life pioneered are far more commonplace now. I mean, it used to be, Philip and I would talk to the press about people paying money for a virtual item, and now everybody spends a ton on iTunes and buys apps every day. Or why would you ever want to communicate with somebody that you haven't met face to face, and now everyone's hopping on Twitter all the time. So there's a lot of sort of social concepts that are far more common and far more normal now. I think that said, there's still obviously a lot of people who haven't yet sort of keyed into the potential value. And I think what tends to be effective for me is finding the examples that one, fit their interests. There's such a huge range of things that virtual experiences can do. And so if they're interested in music, talking about, say the ability to reach a global audience without having to travel, those sorts of things. Honing in on the things that, one, align to their interests, and two, focus on what the virtual experience adds that they either can't get or it's just unfeasible in the real world, I think tends to help them come around.
Yeah, another way to look at it is just, I think the nature of all disruptive technologies is that they inevitably make some things worse while making other things better. A lot of people are going to focus on the worst things. That's cool. I would say, another version of what Peter said is focus on the thing that is unambiguously a win right now with the technology. So, pulling it back to very tactical. I think that's education. I've talked about it a lot. We've demonstrated it. We're building a model of a human cell that you can take a class inside of, and then like later this summer, we're probably going to start putting kids inside with a high school biology teacher with HMDs on learning about the biology of the cell from inside the cell. That's just a huge, solid across the board win, right? If that works, if we can sort that out, everybody's going to agree, what a fantastic way to do learning. So I think it's an example of like a tactical thing that works for everybody. But if you're looking at it more broadly, you're going to have people focusing on the negative aspects that are taken away, and I mean those will probably be around for a while. We're not going to have raging waterfalls in high fidelity, even in 10 years' time because of the difficulty of simulating them. I don't know,
Yeah, I'd say I think the problems and the challenges of conveying this to the new audience are a little different in VR. It's sort of a blessing and a curse of VR that you can explain what we do. Like if you haven't used any of the the VR version of Second Life or High Fidelity or Convrge or Altspace, you'll hear what we do and you think, okay, yeah, I kind of get that, and maybe I think I know why that's compelling. But I'm telling you, in 45 seconds, most people that we put into a demo say, oh, I get it now. I see what use case I would use this for. I'm going to do my next fantasy football draft with my buddy who's in Chicago, and that's how we're going to do it. And for every different person, they have a different experience that resonates with them. And the really challenging thing is that it often takes them using the product for it to click. And I think this is true for a lot of VR, frankly, that people have to sit down and put on the headset, and then it's really fast that they get it, but often a verbal description or pictures or videos or any of the mediums that we usually communicate and market our products with are just, they kind of fall short. And so it takes getting people into the product.
So from what I understood of the question, my answer is I think it's a perception problem and an ease of use problem. So the perception problem is it's VR and VR social spaces, virtual worlds are seen as like a thing for nerds and a thing that's unapproachable for the mainstream. I mean, we've been running Convrge for about 6 months now, and I still haven't been able to get my mom or sister to use it. I think because they're just super intimidated of like, you know, that's something that requires high tech skills. Like virtual reality, I'm already lost, and you know, so I think ease of use and making it so that people aren't intimidated to get in here. I think Minecraft is like a beautiful example of probably one of the most successful virtual worlds at creating something really easy to use. You just hop in and you know, you're creating stuff with friends, you're exploring the world, and yeah, just ease of use and the perception problem. And I also think giving people things to do that really pique their interest that might not be associated with virtual worlds right now. So if you think virtual worlds are just gonna like go in and nerd out with people, maybe if someone tells you, oh, you can go and spend time with like PewDiePie in person, or like one of your favorite, you know, members of a band, or like this person you really respect and look up to is going to be giving a talk, I think you're going to see a lot more people being pulled into these spaces, as long as they're easy enough to access and they don't have like a huge perception problem.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. This has been a fantastic discussion, and yeah, thank you everyone.